11 horrifying but creatively sophisticated 80s monsters explained in detail. Monsters have always been the purest essence of horror, and it's true that we always fear what we don't understand. Having said that, the 80s were definitely a time period when our anxieties seemed way larger than life. It goes without saying that this particular era was more like a home to not only some of the best horror movies ever made, but also to some of the most terrifying creatures on display. These monsters simply made sure that our fears looked every bit as real as they felt. In today's video, we are going to take you through 11 horrifying but creatively sophisticated 80s monsters and also explain them in detail. You might want to keep your lights on for this one. Before we go into our list, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin. Homo Aquaticus, Leviathan, 1989. A team of deep-sea miners supervised by geologist Stephen Beck discovers a Soviet shipwreck. On finding a safe inside the vessel, they bring it back to their base. The safe contains a flask of vodka along with some records and a video log of the captain of the ship, Leviathan. Things take a different turn when one of the crew members shares the vodka with another member, leading to some unimaginable end results. They soon come face to face with a mutant creature, one that happens to be the result of a failed genetic experiment. How does the idea of a creature with a human head on its hunched back sound to you? Creepy, right? Okay, now imagine a human arm emerging from its side. Is it disturbing enough? Well, say hello to Homo Aquaticus, the main antagonist of the late George P. Cosmatos' 1989 science fiction horror film Leviathan. This semi-aquatic, hideous-looking creature, formed as a result of mutated humans, has a very diversified look throughout the whole film thanks to its DNA absorption skills. However, when the creature finally decided to grace the viewers in the finale, it looks somewhat like a Gilman. Remember the antagonist from The Creature from the Black Lagoon? Well, if it was a little larger in size, black and brown in color, and covered in scales, you'd get Leviathan's beast. Homo Aquaticus even had a bulging open lower jaw filled with razor-sharp teeth. Well, in terms of the idea behind this monstrosity, full credits to Cosmatos and legendary artist Stan Winston. The duo literally scanned through a library of medical reference books and marine life pictures. In fact, they were so inspired by the science of life that they eventually came up with the idea of blending human body parts and elements of deep-sea marine fauna into a unique creature, one that was never really seen on screen before. Also, many don't know this, but the monster here was highly inspired by the creature from The Thing. No wonder Leviathan is considered an all-time classic creature feature today, boasting incredible cinematography by Alex Thompson. Jerry Goldsmith's musical score also deserves a positive mention. After all, a soundtrack featuring whale sounds isn't something that you get to hear on a regular basis. We highly recommend that you watch this, and if it makes you feel less anxious, the creature does meet its end after a demolition charge is thrown into its mouth, causing it to blow up. Rawhead Rex, Rawhead Rex 1986. Howard Hallenbeck and his family have come all the way to Ireland to do some research for a book that he's writing. While he is visiting rural churches and taking pictures of graves, a farmer accidentally happens to remove an ominous stone column on a field, unleashing the monstrous pagan god Rawhead Rex. On being woken up from its slumber, this ancient creature goes on a rampage, killing literally anyone in sight. Those who have managed to read Clive Barker's short novel Rawhead Rex knows how sinful and categorically distressing the story actually is. From having an appetite for devouring small children, hating women, to having sexual issues and even urinating on priests, these are the monstrous traits that give more depth to Rex. Boasting superhuman strength, he can very easily tear through flesh and rip his victims apart. George Pavlov's 1986 Irish fantasy horror flick has him flip a van, shrug off bullets, and even survive a massive explosion from a gas tank. Wondering how this monster looks? We will get to that as well. Mark our words when we tell you that his description in the original story and the movie isn't exactly the same. He is pretty tall, but he looks more like an ogre that is fully clad in armor. His head and chest, however, remain exposed all the way down to the abs. He has glowing red eyes, his skin tone is light brown, and he even sports a bushy, untidy mohawk. You also cannot miss out on those lion-like teeth, which are mostly smeared in blood. He is simply feral thanks to his sadistic killing nature. We bet you didn't know that the Rawhead Rex costume was made as a single piece using latex skin. The special effects team had about 4 weeks to make the costume ready for Heinrich von Schellendorf, who was only 19 years old back then. Believe us when we tell you that the actor worked out rigorously straight for 2 months to get into shape and play the part of the monster. Well, it goes without saying that he did a fabulous job. Rawhead Rex lives up to the movie tagline. He is pure evil, pure power, pure terror. In fact, unlike Clive Barker's original story, he is even shown to be alive in the end. Deadly Spawn. The Deadly Spawn, 1983. 2 campers have their outdoor fun interrupted when a meteor crashes very close to them. When the duo goes to investigate, they are unexpectedly attacked and devoured by some kind of life form. These creatures happen to be aliens who have crash-landed and soon make their domain in the basement of a nearby old house. Eventually, they start devouring more humans, and now it is up to a bunch of teenagers to find a way to stop these alien monsters before they spawn and end humanity. Well, it's close to 40 years that Douglas McEwan's science fiction horror film hit theaters, and believe us when we tell you that this film has a huge cult following. The gore and creature effects on display is simply outstanding, which means it is certainly not for the faint of heart. The creatures are made to look so real that you can still feel them around the corners of your home. Speaking of their appearance, they look like pinkish or say orangish slugs with an endless number of needle-sharp teeth, making them always appear hungry. The Deadly Spawn do not possess eyes, which means they are highly reactive to sound. On the other hand, the mother spawn is simply huge, capable of asexual reproduction and possessing multiple heads that are quite capable of growing into separate creatures. The adult spawn is quite strong. Breaking down a door or biting a human head off seems like a rather easy task. As viewers, you might be interested in knowing where the idea for the movie came from. Well, according to producer Ted A. Boas, it was a piece in the National Geographic magazine about seed pods recovered from the Arctic that encouraged him. Initially, he did create a creature design involving a man in a suit, but it didn't match up to the expectations of the associate producer and effects director John Dodds. Dodds then worked on it and eventually came up with a lot of alternatives, one of which happened to be the mother spawn design that was ultimately used. Also, believe us when we tell you that the mother spawn was actually created in the basement of Dodds. While it was being made, no one really paid attention to the size. So, when it was ready to be brought on the set, it was so huge that one of its heads had to be cut off to make it past the doorway and then reassembled later. Hats off to the entire team for pulling off the Deadly Spawn in spite of the shoestring budget. Please do not hesitate to give this one a shot. It's a pure classic. INTEC Cockroaches, The Nest, 1988. In the small, sleepy island town of Northport, nothing exciting ever happens. Sheriff Richard Tarbell also seems to have the smoothest job in town. In fact, the only obstacle in his life is whether to be involved with the owner of the local eatery or his high school sweetheart, the mayor's daughter. However, things go haywire when flesh-eating mutant roaches attack the peaceful community and start slaughtering its residents. This 1988 American sci-fi horror flick not only marks the directorial debut of Terrence H. Winkless, but can also be regarded as one of the best Roger Corman productions back in the 80s. Loosely based on Eli Cantor's 1980 novel also of the same name, the movie surprises us with some amazingly gross gore effects, even though the cockroaches used in the film were actually picked up directly from the streets. As per the movie, the initial plan of the INTEC company was to genetically engineer a breed of cockroaches to get rid of other pests, but the insects seemed to go out of control and soon began devouring everything that crossed their path. Well, if only these insects would have just stopped at eating, which is clearly not the case here. These hordes of large black cockroaches even begin to transform into the ones they were consuming. It's hard not to remember the cat roach, man roach, and the queen roach. The first one looked more like a skinless cat with tiny blotches of fur, insect-like mandibles, several legs, and antennae emerging from the ear tips. The man roach looked more like a skeletal humanoid, having a gooey, slimy surface with hardly any hair and protruding mandibles on its cheeks. And the queen roach looked even more dreadful. Imagine a bulky monster made of human corpses all fused together into one body. The fact that these INTEC cockroaches were always found in large numbers made them even more creepy. They were also shown to be pretty intelligent and not affected by pesticides. With a clever script by Robert King and a running time of 89 minutes, The Nest is compelling and bound to give you a roach phobia. Alien, The Hidden, 1987. A squid-like alien form has the ability to take control of human beings and make them go on a literal violent crime spree. Pursuing this alien parasite is an FBI special agent along with a local detective. As the duo digs in deeper, they realize what they are fighting against is not something ordinary. The alien happens to be a thrill killer that will not stop, and the FBI agent has his own reasons to chase after the parasitic body snatcher. The alien in Jack Shoulder's horror sci-fi flick is pretty urbane, given its fondness for driving fancy supercars, listening to heavy metal music, or say using high-powered shotguns. This one actually prefers to live a self-indulgent lifestyle through its human host, and it will do literally anything to survive. You will be quite surprised to know that from entering into the body of a dog to transferring itself into the body of a likely presidential candidate and announcing his candidacy, the alien is capable of going to great extents. As you dig deeper into the movie, you will see how the story develops into something very unexpected and yet so fascinating. Are you thinking about how the alien actually transfers itself? Well, it will usually force open its victim's mouth and send a slug-like parasite into the body. And when the alien takes charge of the new persona, it grants its host with boosted stamina, durability, and resilience. Also, the fact that it can move very quickly from one host to the other makes it even tougher to catch and anticipate. With a brilliant screenplay by Jim Koff, The Hidden is truly a hidden gem and highly recommended. Also, to all the fans of John Carpenter's The Thing, if you pay attention to this one, you will see that the movie actually features the same SFX. We aren't going to disclose the scenes. You will have to watch it yourself and figure that out. QQ, The Winged Serpent, 1982. The Aztec deity Quetzalcoatl happens to be a flying, dragon-like female lizard that has made the top of New York City's Chrysler Building her den. The monster has been taking regular strolls during the daytime, consuming several helpless New Yorkers on the rooftops. In the meantime, Jimmy Quinn, a small-time crook, accidentally stumbles upon her habitat while trying to hide from the police after a failed diamond heist. Hell-bent on turning this particular piece of information to his advantage, Quinn makes a deal with the city, asking for $1 million in exchange for the location of the Quetzalcoatl's nest. Full credits to director and writer, the late Larry Cohen, for coming up with this 1982 American monster horror film, which by the way also happens to be Cohen's favorite work. There are various interviews of Cohen that states how often he used to gaze at the Chrysler Building and say, "That'd be the coolest place to have a nest." Well, no wonder this was the idea that set the movie in process. Q happens to be short form for Aztec god Quetzalcoatl, who is half a reptile and half a bird. Although Q is described as a winged serpent, the creature bore more resemblance to a dragon. Boasting 4 limbs, a colossal pair of bat-like wings, a beak very similar to that of a bird, and a long stretched-out neck, this brown-hued monster likes to bite off heads. Science fantasy artist Boris Vallejo, who did an incredible job with a lustrous monster illustration of the film's poster, Randall William Cook, and the late David Allen deserve a special mention for creating the special effects of the flying serpent using the technique of stop-motion animation. Q, the Winged Serpent happens to be a solid, intriguing horror movie, but it's undeniably the quirky humor along with the tense atmosphere that sets the flick apart from being just a regular monster blockbuster. This little gem here totally deserves to be watched, and if you're ever in the mood, just browse on YouTube. Razorback, 1984. A gigantic wild boar has been terrorizing the Australian outback, viciously devouring not just animals but also humans. When an American wildlife reporter's disappearance is ruled out as an accident, her husband travels all the way to Australia in search of her and the truth. It would be a huge mistake to judge this 1984 Australian horror flick just by its synopsis. No matter how ridiculous the plot might sound to you, you will be surprised to see how even the most preposterous narrative can be overlooked if you are blessed with some good camera work. Razorback marks the directorial debut of Russell Mulcahy, who has been simply outstanding, efficaciously maintaining an eerie, suspenseful atmosphere. Combine his brilliant direction with Dean Semler's mind-blowing cinematography, and you have one of the best-looking horror movies right in front of you. Believe us when we tell you that Semler not only won the AACTA Best Cinematography Award for the film, but also Cinematographer of the Year from the Australian Cinematographer Society. Coming to the special effects, they have been judiciously well, especially the creature ones for Razorback. There's this close-up shot of its eye during the finale that is bound to stick with you. Also, the image of an enormous wild boar sporting shaggy gray hair and two dangerous pairs of tusks can look quite terrifying. We bet you didn't know that 6 boar animatronics were made for the film, one of which was particularly designed to ram into vehicles. While it's true there isn't much gore on exhibit, Razorback does make up for it with a relentless action. The first half of the movie is all about intense car chasing scenes, demolitions of homes, and kangaroo shootings, enveloping you in the midst of everything. There's no harm in watching Razorback, but only if you want to. Metal Fetishist, Tetsuo the Iron Man, 1989. A metal fetishist cuts open his thigh and inserts a metal rod into the wound only to learn later that his wound is decaying and infested with maggots. Disturbed, he simply runs out of his hideout screaming into the street and is hit by a car driven by a salaryman. It does not take the salaryman much time to figure out that his body is gradually being transformed into a distorted amalgam of flesh and metal and will soon turn into an Iron Man. Somehow, the metal fetishist happens to be the mastermind behind the whole transformation. Despite the movie's friendly title, please do not make the blunder of confusing this 1989 Japanese cyberpunk body horror flick with a Marvel superhero movie. Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo the Iron Man undeniably happens to be a cult movie with a fan base including the likes of Quentin Tarantino himself. The fact is, it is an unforgettable body horror flick with a powerful musical score by the late Japanese composer and musician Chu Ishikawa. Tsukamoto portraying the role of the fetishist is simply brilliant. The moody black and white cinematography is definitely something that makes his character of the metal fetishist even more menacing. From elements like wires, drills, cables, and even steel to that large drill penis, the metal fetishist is pure evil. Watch this movie for the climax that's both unexpected and inevitable at the same time. Definitely a must-watch for fans of Japanese movies and body horror.
Basket.
Belial Bradley, Basket Case, 1982. Dwayne Bradley happens to be a charming young man who arrives in New York City with a locked wicker basket. The basket contains his deformed conjoined twin brother, Belial, who was surgically separated from his brother at an early age and against their will. The twin brothers seek revenge against the doctors who are accountable for their separation, but things take a total flip when Dwayne ends up befriending the nurse Sharon and eventually falls for her. Director and writer Frank Henenlotter, not even in his wildest of dreams, ever thought his 1982 American horror flick would actually turn out to be a success.
Killing Liftlander was your idea, coming to New York to get the other...
Well, it's almost 40 years since the original released, yet it's still considered to be a cult classic amongst fans. The character of Belial happens to be the ultimate creature design. It might look ridiculous given that it appears like a mass of Caucasian flesh, one with a deformed face, sharp teeth, claws, and even 2 arms. However, don't judge him by his size, as Belial possesses a great amount of strength and even the power of telepathy. As you delve deeper into the movie, his character even manages to become quite convincing. It is genuinely scary. The special effects, along with the gore sequences, deserve a positive commendation given that they were so well executed despite the film's low budget. Trust us, you won't be disappointed. Chuds. Chud, 1984. A strange sequence of sudden disappearances on the streets of New York City seem to direct towards something evil residing in the sewers. The plot revolves around a group of people who join forces to investigate, eventually discovering that the missing people have fallen victims to a group of grotesquely deformed vagrants living below the cityscape. The Chuds, short for cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller, tend to be hideous flesh-eating creatures, about 6 feet tall with glowing yellow eyes, very sharp teeth, and slimy brown skin. Once human, these creatures have been mutated by radioactive chemical toxic waste dumped in the very sewers that they once used as their home. The Chuds usually prey on the homeless living in the underground tunnels, but a recent drop in the underground population have made them come up to the surface in order to continue feeding. The rubber suits and the animatronic work on the creatures are outstanding. The fact that they are usually kept in the dark or shadows is something that works in their favor and makes them look even more tense when one decides to pop up somewhere. It's true that Douglas Cheek's 1984 sci-fi horror flick wasn't a blockbuster hit, but then again, Chuds has the element of originality on display, something that horror films these days hardly offer. Also, kudos to the filmmakers for coming up with an entirely new creation, a new breed of monster for that matter. Highly recommended that you watch this and stay away from its sequel.
If you guys enjoyed this video, give us a like, subscribe, and press that bell icon that will help you get notifications. We upload an awesome video every day. Have an amazing day ahead and stay safe.